distinct pleasure of working with people like tomorrow's North Shore Pride. I hope everyone's coming to the North Shore Pride events tomorrow. To that end, we have some t-shirts if you want to show some support up front that you can purchase. We have tickets. We're going to be marching in the parade tomorrow. We are going to be having a boat cruise tomorrow. We're going to have an after party at Vic's. If you need any information, please go to gooutloud.com or follow up with us in the front of the booth over here. We have plenty of information for you. So please, if you can join us tomorrow, I would love to see many familiar faces there, which I know many of you are coming along. But the exciting news is that we will have a sister company. It is officially on file. The 501c3 will be received hopefully very soon. We have great lawyers that are working on this on our behalf. But Give Out Loud is a sister company that we are announcing here tonight, where we're going to help other nonprofits do their thing through fundraising and promotional support. We have done this with a series of nonprofits like North Shore Pride, North Shore Art, Lightbridge, Bagley, NAGLY, AIDS Action Committee, the Boston LGBT Film Fest, Startup, the Community Action Programs, and of course we've lent some testimony to the Non-Discrimination Act. It's a whole lot of goodwill that we're putting out there, and it's because we have community members like you who help us get that word out, to make sure that we have equality for all of our people here in Salem, in the North Shore, in Massachusetts, in New England. And it takes people like you tonight who are here. So give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you all for coming. Again, I want to thank the Go Out Loud team members that are here tonight. I know Alex is here, Thomas, of course, is here, Kevin, myself, Celine's in the back. We have our intern, Sarah. We have an Expects team from Salem State. David Zimmerman is the publisher of Boston Spirit Magazine, the premier LGBT publication in New England, and we're honored to have him here tonight. He's going to go through the rules, he's going to give some notes himself, and so I'm not going to take any more of your time, but if you have any questions, we do have people up front here. Thank you again to the candidates, and without further ado, David Zimmerman to explain the rules tonight.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Go Out Loud's 2014 Quality Forum. We are very happy to be here tonight at this beautiful, beautiful hotel, the Hawthorne Hotel, so thank you to the Hawthorne and Thomas for having us. Before we start, I'd like to take a quick minute, because it struck me this week how lucky we are to live in a state and in a region that we do. We've got politicians, Democrat, Republican, both sides of the aisle, who are incredibly supportive of LGBT rights and the dignity of the LGBT community. As far as I know, no one on our panel tonight has equated homosexuality with alcoholism recently, so we have that. To make my point, a couple of examples of what we would be dealing with if we were not so lucky. Rick Perry, we just referenced, recently stated whether or not you feel compelled to follow a particular lifestyle, you have the ability to decide not to do that. I may have the genetic coding that I'm inclined to be an alcoholic, but I have the desire not to do that. And I look at the homosexual issue the same way. Thank you, Rick. Susan DeTanis, a congressional candidate in Chicago, believes that God controls the weather in and of itself. Not all that bad as people believe, that's fine. Thank you for the wonderful weeks this week. She, however, goes on to state that tornadoes, autism, and dementia are punishments for the gay rights movement. Thank you, Susan. And then we have the wonderful Susan Chan back in Texas and San Antonio, who say that I don't think homosexual people should do adoption. They should be banned by adoption. You're going to confuse the kids when you see two women kissing or two men going into a bedroom. It's confusing. It's confusing. I don't know if it's all that confusing, although I think Susan's grammar is a bit confusing. So with all that in mind, we are very lucky to be here tonight. And if you are not all too drunk with homosexuality, I'd like you to give a big round of applause for our candidates. Carlos Tierney is on his way, by the way. He's flying in from Washington, D.C. We'll be here soon. So, very quickly, let's go over some rules, and then we will get started. All of the candidates tonight are vying to represent Massachusetts' 6th Congressional District. Each candidate was given a master list of questions prior to arriving tonight. From that master list, I will ask each candidate 3 questions. I will ask each candidate to answer the questions that I ask, and if there is time after they answer those questions, they are welcome to include any personal remarks. Each candidate will get 10 minutes of time, and I will be keeping the time on my phone, on the timer which I practiced and learned how to use today. I should be all set with that. I will ask each candidate to limit their answers to reflect how they would address the issue in the question, and not necessarily to comment on any of the other candidates or how they might answer any of those issues. It's important to recognize tonight neither Go Out Loud nor Boston Spirit Magazine are endorsing or promoting any of the political candidates, their parties, etc. We are simply holding this forum to educate and to benefit the LGBT community and those who are supportive of the LGBT community. And hopefully along the way we'll get a little bit of a glimpse into how these candidates view themselves as leaders via the role of the U.S. Congress. I will ask that you hold your cheers or your applause until I give you the okay, so that we can keep this rolling along and keep the schedule intact. By random drawing tonight, the order of appearances are Richard Tisei first, John Devine second, Seth Moulton third, Marisa DeFranco fourth, and then Congressman Tierney fifth. So we will start with Mr. Tisei. Former State Senator Richard Tisei was elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives in 1984, becoming the youngest Republican elected in Commonwealth history. If I am not mistaken, you were 11 years old. Yes? Board 1. He served as a member of the Education Committee and the Committee on Government Regulations. In 1990, Richard was elected to the State Senate, which began a run in which he was re-elected 10 times. He served as a member of the Ways and Means Committee and in a number of other leadership capacities, and in 2006, his colleagues chose him to serve as Senate Minority Leader, a position he held through 2010. So at this time, I invite Richard Tisei to come up to get some questions, and for those who would like to applaud for Richard Tisei, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you very much. I told David a little earlier I will not use my opponent's straightness against him. Hey, first of all, let me just thank Go Out Loud and Boston Spirit for hosting tonight's forum. I think it is important to have all the candidates come and for you to get to know us and what we're all about. Before I go any further, I have to recognize my husband, Bernie, who's right in the front row here. Bernie was a little horrified to see the things that were given out with this photo on. He's not very political, but I do have to say that I am the person who I am because of Bernie and all the love that he's given me in support. I wouldn't be here tonight as a candidate, and I wouldn't be the person I am without him. So please give him a hand. Just a couple of things I would say just in my introduction, I think that are important. David mentioned that I served in the Senate for 20 years, and during that time I had an opportunity to work with a lot of LGBT advocates and allies to try to push a lot of different pieces of legislation for obviously the most historic bill in the entire time I was there during that 20-year period was the marriage equality fight that took place at the State House. And most people, I think, here remember that it wasn't just the court approving marriage equality, because the minute that happened, there was a constitutional amendment filed to take those rights away. And for 4 years, there was a battle that took place at the State House. And I was thinking about this the other day, just how far our state has come over the past 10 years. I remember there was one gentleman who called me every week. I'd inevitably bump into him all the time. And he was very much against, very passionate against gay marriage. The calls were coming in 20 to 1 against it. Most Democrats at the State House supported civil unions, not gay marriage. And I had an opportunity to bump into him about 3 weeks ago. And he came up to me and said, you know what, I'm sorry. You know, I had the wrong position. Over time, I've really looked at this, and I'm ashamed that I was so opposed to it at the time. But I know it was the right thing to do now. And some of the arguments that we had about it ended up helping to change his mind. So the one thing I have learned during my time in public office is that the best way to continue moving ahead and to see progress on our issues are to engage and reach out to our opponents rather than to attack and vilify. And that's what has to be done, I think, in the long run, because it does pay a lot of dividends. It has here in Massachusetts. Finally, I would say that my party in particular hasn't been very attentive to LGBT issues. And one of the things that really excites me about this campaign is not only the opportunity to go to Washington to fight to change the direction of this country, but also the opportunity that I'll have to help bring the Republican Party into the 21st century on these issues. So thank you very much for having me.
Since you brought up the topic of marriage equality, question number one. What measures would you take to have marriages, civil unions more recognizable outside of Massachusetts and the states where it is now legalized in regards to specific rights of married couples such as Social Security, maternity, health care, etc.?
The action that has to be taken is for DOMA to be completely repealed. And the Supreme Court repealed Section 3 of DOMA last summer, if you remember. And that was the section that allowed federal benefits to be able to enjoy as a married couple all of the federal benefits. That was huge. And at the time, Bernie and I have been talking about getting married for years and years. And when that happened, we said, you know what, now's the time. And a month later, after that Supreme Court ruling, we got married because we knew it felt great to have the federal government respect our relationship and respect our marriage. Unfortunately, Section 2 did not get repealed. And Section 2 pretty much means that all the rights that were afforded here in Massachusetts, if Bernie and I were to move to Indiana or South Carolina or other states that don't have marriage equality in those states, for the most part, we're out of luck. And we don't get a lot of those federal benefits, particularly with Social Security and other things. And, you know, this spring is really important to me, and our relationship and our marriage is really important to me. And it shouldn't matter if we're married in Massachusetts, if we're living in Massachusetts, or another state. And I think most people understand that that's a matter of fairness. So repealing DOMA completely is something that would be on my agenda. I would support the Respect for Marriage Act in Congress. I would co-sponsor that bill, and also co-sponsor the Social Security and Marriage Equality Act. And I think that really long-term what we're looking at is, again, the repeal of DOMA, and it might not happen in the Congress, but I definitely think it's going to end up happening within the courts. Same thing like Lovely versus Virginia for interracial marriage. At one point, the court's going to come out and rule that denying people their basic civil rights is unconstitutional. And until that happens, we're going to have to fight state to state. And I was very honored to be able to be a signer on the amicus brief, a friend of the court brief for Proposition 8 for California. The Supreme Court ended up hopefully looking at that brief and overturning that law. And just last week, I signed on to a brief, a friend of the court brief, to overturn DOMA in Michigan. We're going to make progress as we go along. And I just think it's really important right now for people to recognize that we're living in a great time. It might seem frustrating to people, but if you think about everything that's happened state by state, all the changes that have taken place, it is a very exciting period of time. And I hope, as the congressman, to be able to go down to Washington and help propel and be a catalyst to bring more change forward.
Wonderful. All right. I'm going to give you a quick time check so you know you've got a little bit over 4 minutes. Okay, so keep us on track.
Okay.
In a recent issue of Boston Spirit magazine, we did an article on LGBT teen homelessness, and it is a rampant problem right now. The numbers are staggering. What steps would you take to approach the issue of homelessness with LGBTQ youth?
Obviously, a huge issue. There shouldn't be any homelessness, particularly among children and young people, in particular, who are part of the LGBT community. You get to the point where it's so hard for so many of them to get to the point to accept themselves for who they are, and then they go to their families and find out that the families reject them and toss them out. And, I think on the big picture, it's tolerance. We have to continue to teach more tolerance and try to continue to change people's opinions on this issue. But on the short term, I really do think it's more of a state issue than a federal issue. There are a couple of federal discretionary programs that we can try to make sure that the money goes to the programs here that are the most beneficial for this problem. But on the state level, Massachusetts is usually pretty good, and we're moving ahead on a number of things. I think that kids who find themselves homeless, number one, are in a different type of situation because they're leaving an unsafe environment, and to go into a shelter, more often than not, they're entering a very much more unsafe environment. So I do think that it's incumbent upon the state to set up training programs for everybody who's involved in housing, right down to the local level, so they know how to deal and know how to best help these kids who need help the most. I'd also say that we need more short-term safe houses, specifically geared to the LGBT community, and specific shelters as well. We have some pilot programs. This is all very new to the state that are going on. There's the Youth on Fire program in Cambridge that I'm familiar with, and also the Mass Housing and Shelter Alliance are doing a lot specifically for the LGBT community, and we should continue to do everything we can to support them in their efforts to try to resolve this issue.
Thank you. With regard to the job market, what are your plans to ensure equality in the job market? What would it entail, and how would you measure if it is successful?
The job market, as most people know, trying to get a job isn't very good right now. But I would say that the issue for our community, more than any other, is the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. It's in Washington right now. I got to say, we should all have zero tolerance for any discrimination in the workplace. No one should be fired from their job for being gay or having their employers think they're gay. That's totally unacceptable. There is a bill right now in Congress. It's stuck in the House of Representatives, and I just want to let people know that I will co-sponsor that piece of legislation. I think it's really important. And it isn't, there are a lot of sponsors. The problem is getting the bill through onto the floor. And I will sign a discharge petition to make sure that that bill ends up on the floor. And I look forward to being an advocate, not only here in this district, but throughout the country, to try to get that done. Some people have said to me, well, you might have a problem, with the Speaker of the House on that bill. What will you do? And I just want to let people know when marriage equality was being debated in the State House, I looked Mitt Romney right in the eye, and I told him he was wrong on the issue. He was on the wrong side of history. And I want people to know that I believe in what I believe in, and I will have no problem telling the Speaker of the leadership that this bill is the right thing to do, and nobody should be discriminated against, and everybody should be treated equally and fairly under the law. And let me just say in conclusion that I've always said, for those of us who really care about equality, put that first. We're never going to have true equality in this country unless we have people in both political parties who are willing to stand up for what's right. Stand up for the fact that every American should be treated equally, fairly, under the law. And if I'm the congressman from this district, you can be sure that that's exactly what I'll do. Thank you.
Well, I will say at the very least, you've got a wonderful sense of time. Next up, we will have John Devine. John has roots in both Essex and Middlesex counties. His family has owned a house in Rockport since 1944. I'm very jealous. And originally hails from Wilmington. John spent approximately 10 years as a paralegal and a contractor consultant working with large corporate law firms, and delivering legal products and in the nonprofit world. He has also spent time in construction, in carpentry, in auto repair, and is a very well-rounded guy. Jack of all trades, right. John, as an undergraduate, worked as an intern in the Comparative Evolutionary Neuroanatomy Laboratory in the Biological Wing, Department of Anthropology at Harvard University. And I did that with no mistakes, as far as I know. A graduate of Harvard, he is currently working on a graduate school credential in environmental policy at the UMass Dartmouth Graduate School of Education, Public Policy and Civic Engagement in the Department of Public Policy. A round of applause for John Devine.
thanks for the invitation. I want to thank Go Out Loud and Boston Spirit for sponsoring this event here at the Hawthorne Hotel. It's important, for us all to come here and speak about these issues. There's a lot of very important work left to accomplish, and I'm very pleased and proud to be here with you tonight to address these issues and add my voice in the debate here in this race for the House of Representatives in District 6. Basic civil rights has come a long way in our country over the last 50 years. Albeit, we still have a long way to go. My brother, Paul James Devine, he studied oppressed third world cultures, women's studies and gay rights at Vassar College. And he and I had a lot of different discussions about these kinds of issues over the years. His passion as a member of the LGBTQ community has influenced my viewpoint on these issues quite a bit. And he once said to me when we were back in college, he said, think about it. In America, there's no person more subject to discrimination than an African-American lesbian woman. And he felt really strongly that there needs to be protections for equal rights, and argued really strongly about that with me. Not that I disagree with him, but it's something to feel strongly about. It helps motivate me in representing the voice of the LGBT community in the public. Feel so strongly about these issues, and not everybody has the right to marry who they love here in the United States, and I believe they should. Not in every state is it recognized, and it should be. There should be no second-class citizens here in the United States.
Wonderful. Thank you. And again, since you just mentioned it, I will ask you one of the same questions that I asked Mr. Tisset. As a U.S. Congressman, what measures would you take to have marriages, civil unions, more recognizable outside of Massachusetts, and specifically with regard to rights to legally married couples, Social Security, common maternity, health care, etc.?
Well, I agree with Mr. Tisset. Don't want these to be repealed. There's no room for anything like that in this country. It's a discriminatory law at base. It never should have passed. It's ridiculous. I think that a Marriage Fairness Act needs to be crafted and voted upon and passed. That legislation should provide for reciprocity between the states of marriages and civil unions, and for all people in all the states of the United States of America. Right now, worldwide, freedom to marry is recognized in several countries. It's not such a radical idea. It's not a new idea. In Canada, in Iceland, in Belgium, in Spain, in South Africa, Norway, Sweden, Portugal, Argentina, Mexico, and I don't really need to refer to low-hanging fruit, but the Netherlands. Same-sex couples should enjoy the same rights and responsibilities with their partners as anyone else under the law as they do in these countries. Here in this country. In terms of the right to marry, I mean, if a partner's loved one is in the hospital, she has no problem with the hospital personnel to go visit that loved one. It should be recognized, and whether it's insurance or work-related benefits, parenting, and even the right to divorce. I mean, it's not always a rose garden. You know what I'm saying?
I do. Although my marriage is a rose garden. Somebody please tell my wife I said that.
Well, I would sponsor and work to push through legislation that would provide equal right to marry in every state.
Great, thank you. In your work and your research with regard to the LGBT community, are there specific topics or issues that you feel need to be brought to the limelight more, need more education for people?
Yeah, I mean, for people in general, I think Massachusetts is a different group of voters, and a different group of citizens than a lot of other places. But yeah, there needs to be some work in that regard. There's some resistance with the Republican Party. There's some resistance in the middle of the country that really should not be there. it's all about civil rights, whether it goes back to civil rights arguments made at the time of the Civil War in the 1860s, or civil rights arguments made here in this country in the 1960s. I read an article recently where Bill Russell stood up and said that he thought that a lot of members of the LGBT community were fighting the same battles in athletics that black athletes were fighting back in his day when he was playing center for the Celtics. Now, I spent part of my time growing up in San Francisco, California, which is a very unique environment. I went to high school there, the School of the Arts, went to junior college there. And it's a 90% Democrat, and of course it has a strong LGBT community. So I have a different experience than most people. I wasn't confronted with the same kind of ignorance that some people might find in a place like Texas or Louisiana. But you still see some bad attitudes even in the city of San Francisco.
And you've got about 4 minutes left, so we're fine on time. There are going to be some questions that that I asked tonight that you'll see will be repeated because they're important topics, so whether it's marriage equality, jobs, et cetera. I want to give each candidate a chance to really be able to address these major topics as well. So again, another question that I asked Mr. Tsay. With regard to the job market and equality of the job market, should you get elected, what would your plans be to ensure equality in the job market? How would you go about implementing them and measuring their success?
Job equality in the marketplace can only be ensured through crafting and passing laws that prevent discrimination. Just this past week, I read in the Huffington Post that President Obama is working on crafting an executive order preventing discrimination against those of the LGBTQ community among federal contractors. Now, that's a big step. It's an important piece of work, crafting an executive order. That only would apply to federal contractors. Protections should go beyond those confines of federal contractors. Protections against discrimination based on orientation should be extended to the American job market as a whole through legislation. Well-qualified people should never be denied employment based on their race, religion, ethnicity, or their orientation. It doesn't make sense. As your representative, I will work with the president and the other members of Congress on the other side of the aisle to author, pass legislation, sponsor legislation that will provide for protections against discrimination in the LGBT community and hiring practices in the workplace before my term is up, first term. The measure of success with such legislation should be based on hiring statistics as tracked by the Department of Labor and survey an academic study by public and private groups. See if we need to create some more strong measures. But the initial effort is well, my name is John Patrick Devine, and I'm here to ask you for your vote. I want to represent you in your district. It's time for a new direction in the House. I want to be your voice in the House. I'm the only candidate with roots both in Essex County and in Middlesex County, and I have a lot of fresh ideas. I want to bring your concerns at the polls down to D.C. and lead this country in a different direction. My name is John Devine, and I'm here to ask you for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I also want to take a second to recognize that Congressman Tierney has arrived, so we welcome him to the dais, and we'll be up here shortly. However, next to join us will be Seth Moulton. Seth was born right here in Salem, raised up in Marblehead, attended Marblehead Public Schools, followed by Phillips Academy Andover and Harvard. Following college, Seth took the advice of a college mentor and one of the very, very great gentlemen to grace this area, Reverend Peter Gomes. If you don't know who Reverend Peter Gomes is, I encourage you to go home and Google him. At the advice of Reverend Gomes, Seth joined the United States Marine Corps.
While serving in the Corps, Seth took part in 4 tours of duty in Iraq over 5 years. As an infantry platoon commander in the 1st Marine Division, Seth led an infantry platoon during the 2003 invasion and was the 1st Marine company to enter Baghdad. When he returned home the following year, he applied and was accepted to graduate school, but deferred enrollment to again serve his country as a special assistant to General Petraeus.